Hello, my name is William, the Avid reader, and today I'm reviewing Homo Deus, A Brief History of Tomorrow, written by Yuval Noah Harari in 2015. So this book was originally written in Hebrew and then translated into English. It's the second popular book of Yuval Noah Harari. First you had Sapiens, and following this Homo Deus you had 21 lessons for 21st century or something like that. So this is the middle book. So for some reason I started by reading the third book and now I'm at the second book. And then we'll be at the first book. So what is Homo Deus about? It explains how humanity got control of the world, what it has done with this, and how it will lose control. So the basic thesis of this book is humans are making themselves into gods. There are 3 to 4 parts in this book, one could say. It starts with a part 0, an introduction, called The New Human Agenda, and here it discusses how the world has actually become much better in the past century, so less people die from different diseases, viruses no longer kill us as much. For example, with the Ebola crisis recently, if it had happened a few hundred years ago, a lot more people would have died probably. It discusses how different pandemics occurred, so it brings up the diseases brought along to the Native Americans when the Europeans came and colonized. It also discusses how life expectancy may rise a lot, so in the triple digits, but he argues that life expectancy won't grow that much probably, since before people die of unnatural causes in a way, because you always had rich people in the past living into their 70s or 80s or 90s. Look at Ben Franklin, he went into his 80s, I think. So there may actually be a natural human limit around 90. So I think we may live a lot longer than that. He's not so sure about it, but we'll see. But the main point here is humans are becoming gods. They're not sapiens anymore, really, they're deists. Because now they want to be happy and become immortal. But he argues that this will probably be just for a minority of people. So that's the new human agenda, to live longer and to be happier. And that's the introduction of the book. Now, there are 3 official parts of this book. The first part is how humans conquer the world. And here it actually compares humans and animals. And he argues that the reason that humans were able to conquer the world is because they are able to cooperate in large numbers, not like in a beehive sense, because they actually have some creativity. But he doesn't really believe in individualism. He thinks that everything is facilitated by the collective. Now I would probably disagree with that, but we'll get into that later. He also brings up how humans have been very cruel to animals, and animals are a lot smarter than we actually think. They have emotions actually. I mean, pet a dog and see how he'll react, for example. Now, they don't have exactly the same type of intelligence as us. There's the example of someone checking out if a horse could count, and it knocked when given a math solution to solve. But it turns out that the reason the horse understood that is it didn't understand the mathematical calculation, but it could read facial features of the declarer of the number, and then it would tap until it recognized the facial features it wanted. So in that sense, animals are a lot smarter than us in some aspects. So for example, they can psychologically read other animals probably a bit better. Some animals probably hear better, or see more wider range, or hear better. So humans are not necessarily the top of the food chain in everything. But I would say you can dismiss some of this stuff, since humans conquer the earth because they are able to think. They have a conscience. He thinks that humans have a mind, and that's what distinguishes them from animals. But he argues that conscience and intelligence isn't the same thing. So for example, robots, they can be highly intelligent, but they will never really have a conscience. And what makes humans special is we have emotions, these subjective, intersubjective things. The second part of the book is what humanity has done with this power it has received. And Harari argues that we create this fiction and stories we tell ourselves. So the Bible is fiction, liberalism is fiction, communism is fiction, everything is fiction. And he argues that the new fiction is humanism, which centers on a liberal tenet that you listen to your emotions, the best system of government is democracy, the customer is always right, that kind of dogma. And he thinks that humanism is the dominant dogma now, especially since the fall of the Soviet Union. He doesn't really understand why the Soviet Union fell, he just thinks it's because of nuclear weapons. But there's a discussion in this section of how religion and science contrast. So before, back in the day, one used one to justify the other, that was the previous equation, while now we separate them. So religion is for morality while science is for facts. But he thinks that doesn't really work, and that we will actually kind of have a post all type of religions, that the new type of religions will be these different ideologies. He thinks that democracy and liberalism may actually die. And one of the reasons is the third section, which is humans lose control of society, and it's kind of the fall of humanity, because in the third section of the book he argues that technology will conquer us and that we will freely give up our most important power as humans, which is our information, all of the information about us, because we share it readily online, because we publish our day-to-day life. That's true for a lot of people, but if you think about this, this is just an optional thing. It's not definite that humans have to give up their information. But he's kind of arguing this totalitarian thing where technology will take over our lives. We will give up our power and let technology make our choices. I would argue technology will not make our choices. It will actually just facilitate us. It will give us advice, but sometimes we will disregard it. But he thinks that eventually we'll stop disregarding its advice. And here's a question I have for him. What happens when the system bugs? Because it's gonna bug. Then people will return to their crude sensibilities. He argues that the new religion is big data, and hackers are in favor of this new freedom of information, and he distinguishes between freedom of expression and freedom of information, because with freedom of expression you're allowed to express yourself, but you don't have to. Freedom of information, everything is published online, we share everything, and in a sense we already do that, since a lot of people post their life on social media, but not everyone does it. So I would not argue that it's destined to be like that. He thinks it's only going to be a minority that don't do that, and he thinks that you will have a new caste system between the superhumans who upgrade themselves through technology and science and medicine, and then the poor, where the living standards will decrease, and because of global warming things will be screwed up. They will not have the new anti-radiation technology and things like that. And there's a catch-22 here. You cannot slow development for poor people, but if you don't slow it, then you have global warming. So he's really worried about this. So he concludes his book with a few statements and some questions he asks. So these are the three interlinked processes he declares. Science is converging on an all-encompassing dogma, which says that organisms are algorithms and life is data processing. Oh yeah, he thinks that there's no individuality because we're just a biochemical algorithm. I would disagree with that. You cannot believe that individuals don't exist. How would this book be published otherwise? But anyways, I digress. The second point he makes is intelligence is decoupling from consciousness, since robots are intelligent but not conscious. Now we may get some Blade Runner situation if you think about it, where robots may actually be conscious, so I would disagree with that maybe. And his third point is non-conscious but highly intelligent algorithms may soon know us better than we know ourselves. Now this is true, but some of us may not permit ourselves to be known that much by robots, because some people actually value their privacy and they're gonna fight damn good and hard to keep it that way. You can be sure that the Swiss will never give up their privacy to some technology. So I'm sure that some of these societies will remain private. And then the three important questions of this book are organisms really just algorithms, and is life really just data processing? My answer to that would be no. We are not just algorithms, we have a mind, we have free will, we are able to make our own choices. The second The question is, what's more valuable, intelligence or consciousness? Humanity will always be superior to technology, so the answer to that may be consciousness, which is facilitated by intelligence. They go hand in hand. You cannot have intelligence without consciousness. People will not accept that. And the third question is, what will happen to society, politics, and daily life when non-conscious but highly intelligent algorithms know us better than we know ourselves? That will be true in China probably, if that creepy authoritarian dictatorship doesn't collapse, but that's not really going to happen in America, at least not in some states. That may happen in California, but that's not going to happen in Texas. So conclusion to that question, he is a pessimist. He overreacts, I would say. So that's Homo Deus. So how would I rate Homo Deus? I would say 6 out of 10. It's an okay book. He brings up some good questions and he makes you think, but his conclusions are wrong and some of his bases for his questions are wrong. Like, how can you think that individuals don't exist? He thinks that there are two of us. Now, it is true that biology and psychology can help us understand some things, but in the end, we are still independent human beings. You cannot write a book if you do not have a mind. It is not a coincidence that the only species that writes is humans. I really hate that he disregards individualism. He tries to deconstruct it. You cannot. In a sense, this book actually justifies different collectivist ideologies. So it actually discusses in one part of the book fascism and communism, and he says there's nothing inherently wrong with these things, it's just too extreme and we adopted some of the tenets that are actually good in it, and yeah, no, liberalism rocks, he should accept that. But he won't. Humans are biochemical algorithms. No difference really from other animals, and in the end, not that different from robots, no. Robots may be algorithms, humans have free will, so we may have some things that make us change, and yes, we may be able to manipulate our mind, but that is done consciously or consciously by others. It is not just random as he kind of thinks. So yeah, Homo Deus 6 out of 10. It brings up some interesting questions, but it gives the wrong answers quite often. So it's an okay book. So, this was the Avid Reader's review of Homo Deus, A Brief History of Tomorrow, written by Yuval Noah Harari in 2015. I hope you enjoyed this review and I will see you guys next time.